Thanks for tuning in to the 3D Tutor.
Hey guys, and welcome to this 3ds Max tutorial. This time we're going to be looking at a rig for this character. So let's go ahead and do this. So first thing I want to mention before we go into this animation or setting up the rig for this character is to mention about moving from an older version. So right now I'm using the 2006 version, which is the latest version, and I know a lot of you guys have been moving over from older versions such as 2012. Now you can have problems when you move from an older version and you load an existing rigged character into the new one. So if you do have problems, it might be better just to rig the character again. I know some of you guys have been spending a lot of time doing that, but it might just be quicker and easier, and just you just need to get on with it and just do it really, because it'll just save you so much time with trying to faff around and trying to fix it. So start afresh. Alright, with that being said, let's move on, let's move forward and create this. So the first thing we're going to do is in the create tab itself, we're going to create the cat rig. And what cat stands for, it's not the meow kind of cat. We're talking about a cat rig, which is a character animation toolkit rig. And we're going to go over and go into helpers, which is a little icon that looks like a tape measure. We're going to go in the drop down. By default it will say standard. Mine already said cat objects because I'd already selected it earlier, but by default it will say standard, and you want to go in that drop down and go to cat objects. Now within this you want to ignore everything apart from cat's parent. We're not worrying about muscle strands and cat muscle right now, so we're going to go to cat parent and we're going to select the base human. So mine's already highlighted, but you can select loads of different things. You can go on a dinosaur, so if you're building a dinosaur model that looks similar to that, you could use that as a sort of starting point. We're going to go base human just because our character is a humanoid, so it would just make no sense to use something like the crab, for instance. Just want to do this, I want to mention that I have a bit of a sore throat, and it's been playing up a little bit, so if I'm a little bit monotone in this video, then I do apologize. It's just because my throat is playing up. So as you can see with my viewports, I've ensured that I can see the entirety of the front of the character. In fact, I'm going to zoom in on the head area. That's probably the best thing. I'm going to zoom in sort of around the head of the character, make sure I can see that in this front view, making sure that this is set to front and not orthographic or any other view. And then in the perspective view, I'm going to draw this base human rig from in between his legs. Okay, so I'm going to scale that bigger. Now the reason why I do that is so it's kind of aligned fairly well with the character's position, and I'm going to go and keep going, and you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see, but in that front view we can see that the rig is coming up, and what I want is the head to be roughly in the same place. So that's kind of there. I mean, a little bit more, I'd say something like that looks okay. Okay, so the head's kind of in the right place. Yes, it's a little behind, but that's not a big problem really. Next thing, I'm just going to bring that back in. Now it's important that you save on a regular basis. Now the reason for that is because, so I'm just going to copy the location, is because when you're doing rigs and the more advanced things you do, the more chance or the more likelihood that there is for the software to crash. Now I'm not saying it would, but it is always good to save it. Okay, and then also to save a copy as well. So if I just go into that folder, I always create a backups folder, very handy to have, and then I go and, in fact, let's go on to save copy as. That's probably the best option. So if you hit the little arrow next to save as and go on to save copy as, and then go into that folder, you can then just apply a prefix of, I always put just a 01 and then obviously use that number to identify which version of the file it is. So on previous occasions I've had up to 50 different versions of the same model, because I've just done that many tweaks that I wanted to ensure that I don't lose anything. Okay, so anyway, let's move forward with this. So we've got this kind of rig on the inside. It's made up of loads of different pieces. We've got the foot, the shin kind of bone, the thigh, and we've got this, which is the foot platform. Now when you animate the legs or the feet especially, you want to make sure that you move with the foot platform, which is this kind of rectangular outline around the foot. The reason for that is you don't want to be selecting the foot and moving around like this, because it won't actually move the entire leg the way this does. So you can notice how that actually just moves the whole leg. The foot bone will not do that. It will move just from the knee down. Okay, So very important. So I'm going to select the foot platform first of all, and I'm going to be using the rotation just to make it the same angle as the foot, and I'm going to drag that across. Right, now there's a bit of a problem, a couple of issues actually. First of all, don't worry too much about the angle of the foot bone. That's really not a big deal. As long as it's kind of roughly where it should be, that's the key thing. So I'm just going to pull that back a little bit as well. Another problem, like I was saying, is the character itself. So right now we can't actually see through the model, meaning we can't see any of the spine bones or the chest piece or the pelvis really. So what the best thing to do is, if you select the model itself, press Alt and X, and then right click on it and go to freeze selection as well. So what that does is it's now transparent, but also we've frozen the selection, meaning we can't select the model by accident anymore. If you want to bring it back, you just right click anywhere and go to unfreeze all. That's probably the best way to do it, and then that will bring, you can then select the model again. But I'm going to leave it frozen just so I can easily select bones without having to worry about accidentally selecting the model. So what we do with the foot then, let's just go down. We're going to select that foot, and we're going to actually rotate that, not the foot, sorry, the shin on the leg. We're going to rotate that shin bone around. Now when you rotate, the best thing to do is set the rotation tool to local. So you have that drop down at the top. Local is the best one. It means that it will rotate that bone on its own axes rather than doing it based on the view. So I've just kind of spanned that around a little bit just so it faces the same angle as the character model leg. Now once you've done one leg, it's really cool. What you can do is actually remove the second leg. So if I just delete that leg, select the actual pelvis itself, which is right there. I can go into the modify tab and go into add leg, and what that will do is, I don't like that color, I'm going to add another one, is it's going to be applying a new leg but a mirror of the position of the other leg. So that's a great way to save yourself some extra work. Obviously double check to make sure it's lined up. I mean, to be fair, I've not even done the actual knees yet, so I'm going to select the shin bone itself. I'm going to select both of them, and I'm going to just drag those back. Now when you create the legs themselves, it's important that you keep them just slightly bent forward. Don't go too straight or backwards, obviously. Even if you go too straight, it can later get confused and make the bend go backwards. So just add a little bend to it, just like that, just facing forwards, just so it knows which way it needs to bend the knee. Okay, so I'm also going to just select the chest, lift that up, and also select the pelvis and lift this up a little bit as well, because what I find is that it was just a little bit low in between his legs, so I'm going to do that, and then going to just select those shins again, and I'm going to be dragging those forward. Okay, so let's quickly just pop the hands in place. Obviously I'm going to sort of skip a bit of this video as well, because I don't want to be showing you every single step, but I'll show you one arm, and that's all I'll need to do. So we're going to drag that hand where it needs to go. It is a bit fiddly, but you just kind of need to go with it. Again, you can use local as well with the hand. So if you go to, when you're on the move tool, go on to local. It means that you can now move that bone based on its local axes as well, which is quite handy at times. So I'm just going to lift. Let's make sure that we have this positioned where it should be. So where the wrist will go, which is around about here. Okay, just try and make sure that the rotation of your bones is also quite accurate, because you don't want to have like really odd rotation on the bone itself. So let's pull this down a little bit. You know, we don't want the top of the arm to be all the way up here, because it's not going to make sense when it comes to animating the character. It's not going to look good. It's going to animate right the way from above his shoulders. So something like that is okay. That's probably okay. Don't worry too much about what the collarbone looks like, because you know, it's not something you need to really worry about. Just make sure it's sort of in the middle of your mesh. That's always a good thing to do. Okay, so we're kind of getting there right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this and spin this around. Let's get this exactly where it needs to go. Again, quite a fiddly job, not going to lie, but it is something you need to do. Once again, with the scale tool, we can use local as well, and that's going to help us to scale this based on its axes. We don't want to be scaling using the view. It's just going to be really messy. It's going to take a long time to get it in the right position, but using local does make your life a little bit easier. So once you've kind of got it roughly where it needs to go, what you can also do is add fingers. Now this is a decision you need to make. Do you want to add one bone for 3 bones per finger, and also like how many fingers you want to do. What I recommend is, if you're doing quite a quick animation, is setting this figure here num digits to 2. So if you set the value to 2, it's going to add 2 bone sets for fingers or thumbs as well. So what you do is, if you select the very first one, that will select all 3, and you can actually scale them all together, and you can rotate them and other things like that as well. Save that. Now, when you select all 3 and you rotate, you might get an issue like this where it kind of does them all progressively, which is okay. It's kind of quite nice if your character's fingers are quite a little bit bent, but if you don't want that effect, just select the very first one by itself, and then that'll allow you to move the whole lot in one go, and ensuring that it keeps the same angle. But when you want to move, you don't want to select just the first one. You got to double click. I've accidentally snapped my viewport, so make sure that doesn't happen. If you hit just the S key, it will just put you onto the grid snap or the snap toggle mode. So anyway, if you want to move the entire finger, you just double click on the very first one, and then you'll be able to move that no problem. So I'm just going to go ahead and scale this a little bit longer, and that's okay for a very quick rig. You might want to spend a bit more time ensuring that the position is correct. Now, as you can see, I've only got one set of bones for all the fingers, because I want to sort of be able to clench all the fists together in one go. Again, you could like change this value to 5, and that would give you... Oh, wrong thing. Let's make sure we select the palm bone. That's always a good thing to do, and then set 5. Now, the reason why they're so thick is because the original one was very thick, so what we need to do is we double click, and we can actually just select the scale, just scale those thinner, double click the next lot, just do that on every single one. So bring them in, boom, boom. Okay, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, and then you just line these up in the same way that I've just mentioned. But I'm going to leave it as 1 for now, because I think it's just going to be a little bit easier to animate. So I'm just going to make them a little bit wider, and I'm going to bring them out and scale them like so. So that's fine. That's going to be okay. If you want, just put a little angle on them as well. Should be alright. Okay, so now once again, once you've got one finger done, let me just do one last thing. The angle of this isn't quite right, so I'm actually just going to spin this around so that the angle of the bones match the angle of the thumb. So it's kind of like that, I believe. And then maybe angle down a bit. Let's just move this as well. Okay, that'll do just fine. Okay, so once you've got that arm done, and there is one last thing that I want to mention. Obviously, we can position the head where it needs to go, but what we need to do is we need to scale the bones so that they're a little bit thicker than the mesh. Now, mine are already overlapping a little bit, so that's fine. But if you've got quite a brawny character, what you want to do is make the bones bigger than the mesh very slightly, just so they overlap a little bit more. Don't have to be completely bigger, but you know, it does help to be overlapping a little bit more. The reason for this is so we can then just have an outline of all the bones, and it allows you to see the outline of the bones and then be able to manipulate, you know, the actual mesh without having this block covering the actual mesh and not being able to see the geometry or anything below it. And you know, the deformities of it as well, because you'll find that they will deform a lot when you add the skin. Now let's jump straight in. What we need to do then is when you go on the scale tool, make sure you set it to local if you haven't already. Now when you scale like the leg, for instance, you want to make sure you scale just by these two axes. You're not going by the middle of the scale tool, because that will also change the height of the bone. You're going to go with just this border just here, and as you can see, it's only going to affect the width of the bone. So I'm going to do that on both of these, the shin and the thigh, and maybe make this one a little bit longer as well. Just something like that, make it a little bit better of a match to the mesh. Again, I can delete that leg if I want, select the actual pelvis, add leg, and it will be just as thick and placed on the opposite side. Okay, the same applies for the arm, but if we go into the top of the arm here, we're going to scale only in these two axes. So we've got the Z and the Y, and you can see what happens there. Okay, it's just scaling based on its width and length, not the width and length, but in the width. This way we're not going by length like so, or going by the middle, which does it in every single view. So we're going to isolate the scaling to just the two axes, or the two local axes, and we're going to do the same here. That one there, it's a little bit thicker there. Alright, so you can kind of see what's happening. So again, if I delete the other arm now, boom, select the chest, and then I can go to add arm, and that'll add the arm in the opposite side, which should line up as long as your character is symmetrical. If it's not lined up, just double check everything is as close to lined up as possible, and maybe make some adjustments if necessary. Okay, so you've just got your character rig lined up. Obviously mine's a very quick and crude one. I'm just going to go on to save copy as, and I know it's not the most interesting thing to show in a video that I'm saving my files, and saving backups actually, but honestly it saved me so many times when I've crashed out and it's not saved, or something's gone wrong and I've not been able to undo, and it's just, you've got that backup there, you've got it saved, so no matter what, this is all lined up and I don't have to redo it. Okay, so from this point, what you need to do is you're going to unfreeze all, so you can select your mesh. In fact, let's freeze them again. So Alt and X, whoopsie daisy, and let's freeze that. The reason why is I've just forgotten something quite important. we're gonna go in the material editor. We're gonna make sure we're in modes and then compact material editor. We're gonna select a blank material. Now I've already done this before, but a blank material, no matter which one, you can name it as well. So I'm gonna call it character bones wire. And what that means is we're going to set this as a wireframe material. So if I tick wire, I'm going to change the diffuse of this material to something like a sky blue, really bright. And then I'm going to select all the bones. I'm going to apply it. Okay. Now what we need to do is we're going to unfreeze all. We're going to select just the mesh itself and press Alt and X as well to bring that back. Now as you can see the outlines of all the bones, right? And it's a wireframe, but you can still select them, which is quite nice. Now I'm going to change the color, because when I select the mesh itself, it gives me like a blue outline. I don't want the actual bones to be the exact same color, so I'm going to go with a very bright red. Seems to work better. Now once you've done that, we're going to select the actual character model. Okay, now whether you're in edit poly or edit mesh, it doesn't make any difference, but you're going to select the character model itself. You're going to go in this drop down, the modifier list, and you're going to find skin. So it's just skin, not skin morph or anything like that, but just skin. And then we're going to go on to add. Okay, now when you go in the add window, you might have something like this, that it's kind of got the folders all set by hierarchy as the default mode is, but if you go on sort by layer, which is the button right next to it, it's going to then show everything in just a singular list, which is quite handy. It makes it a little bit easier. So what you do is you hit Control A to select all, and then you hold Control and you deselect these icons that look like the helpers, the tape measure icon that we saw earlier. Only the bones need to be selected, so the leg platform and the human R platform. What that means is the two platforms underneath the feet of the character, and the base human, which is literally just the triangular base underneath the character, and then hit select. Just be careful there's no geometry in there that you've left behind, so that could be anything really. A good point to make now, I know I probably should have made this earlier on, is that if you have a character which is made up of more than one element, like more than one part, like the hair's a different model, the eyes are a different model, whatever else it might be, it's a good idea just to group everything, because then it means that you can do the same thing. You don't have to apply the skinning to every single part of that model. It will sort of apply it as a group, which is quite nice. So the grouping's just here. What you do is select all the parts of the model, group it, name it, and then you can add a skin modifier like I've just done, and then add the bones like I've just done as well. Hopefully that made sense. So next we're gonna just see what happens. So we've added the bones, meaning that it should already pick up. So if I go and select the foot platform, which is that one just there, and if I start moving this around, it should move, you know, at least somewhat. I wouldn't say realistically, but it should move. Let's just keep it as that. It should move. Now that's okay, it's moving around. Obviously there's a lot of issues here. You can see at the shoulder and the leg. So I'm going to show you a few examples. It takes quite a while to sort of get this right, so I'll show you a few examples as best as I can. It doesn't always go to plan either, so you'll have to bear with me if it's being a bit tricky. So I'm going to first of all select the mesh. I'm going to go to edit envelopes, and I'm going to select, let's say, the shin envelope. And as you can see with the edit envelopes, we can see how much that bone is affecting the mesh. So if you select these lines that you can see in this mesh itself, we can actually select each one. Now if you have a texture on your model, it can be a little bit tricky to see this. So what you could do is just give it like a very plain blank texture. It's always a good thing to do while you're skinning. So what you do is we want to see that that this isn't. We can see that this isn't quite affecting all the way up the back of his leg. That's why we were having the issue where when you lift the leg and you raise the leg, it's kind of got this weird effect going on there because it's not quite affecting as much as it should. So there's a few ways you can do it. You can either put it in the pose and then do it, but you don't want to be stretching the bones too much while you're simply in the current mode, because what that means is you can actually scale the bones. So before we actually edit the envelopes, good thing to do is probably selecting the base of your cat rig, going into the motion tab, and then adding an ABS layer. What that means is it's an absolute animation layer. You need this to be able to animate your character, and then what we're going to do is we're going to hit the stop sign to turn it into the play sign. Okay, so don't worry too much, but that's what you normally do to animate the character, and what that allows you to do is then move the leg around, and you can see that it doesn't actually stretch. Like, it'll extend, right, which is fine. There's a bit of a problem here just because it's not rigged properly, but not yet anyway. But we can't actually sort of like stretch the leg itself. You know, it stops where it stops, and that's the length of the leg, which is the way we want. So again, let's select the mesh itself, go to edit envelopes, we're going to select the shin, and we're just going to fix this. So there's a few ways you can select and you can edit the envelopes. You've got the 2 points, the top and the bottom of the envelope line itself, and if I was to select the top one, you can see how we can kind of pull that back, and it will change how much it's affecting of the model as well. So we're going to kind of get it roughly in the middle, like so. Then what you can do, you've got an outer and an inner kind of fall off, or a radius if you want to call it that, but you can adjust the outer radius and the inner radius as well. So the inner radius is kind of controlling, it's a little bit more strength, and the outer radius is just a bit more softness to it, just to kind of blend it nicely up with the knee. Now if you select the thigh part as well, that's kind of affecting too far down, so we're going to lift that whole lot up a little bit and maybe pull it back a little bit too. So we can see that the knee actually is going to be, if you look at where the bend is at the back of the leg, we know that the knee is going to be sort of roughly, it should be anyway, in front of the character. So I'm just going to bring that down, maybe bring it forward a little bit. Something like that is going to work quite nicely. Maybe even the outer ring is a little bit too big, so let's just bring that in. In fact, let's leave it the way it was. I think it was probably okay. Now if I was to try the leg now, I'm hoping that it's a little bit better. So if we select just a foot platform, so it's got a little bit of an issue there. I'm going to fix that, but at least the calf itself is functioning a little bit better than what it was before. Okay, so another thing you can do, if you want to actually know for sure that it's going to work and it's going to look good, you can actually place the joint in the position that you want it. So mine's going to be like that, right? I know the leg's a little bit bent, doesn't matter too much at this stage, but what that means is that I can now go into the edit envelopes, and I can edit the envelope on the fly while the character's in the position that he is. So if I was to sort of lift that down, maybe sort of bring it back a little bit, I can kind of play around with it to sort of get it to look as good as you want it. I mean, the problem was that the sort of calf bone was affecting just too far up, so I'm just going to reduce that down a little bit. And what you'll find is that it should make it look just that little bit more realistic. How, you know, you can see what it straightens as it bends. You kind of get that creasing in between at the back of the knee as well, and you're not kind of getting that weird squishing effect. So that's a little bit cleaner. That's quite nice of a flex in that knee there as well. So I'm just going to drop the knee back in position for now. Don't worry too much about the positioning, because we're going to reset that later when it actually comes to animation anyway. Because currently we're in the animation mode. What that means is that any positional change is going to be held within that layer. So as soon as we get rid of the layer at the end and we will create a new layer, it's going to reset the position of the character back into the T-pose, which is exactly what we want. So what I'll do is I'm going to move on to the arm as well. So just to kind of show you how that's done. It's exactly the same process, to be honest, as what I've just shown you. Edit envelope, and you can see like that right now it's affecting just a little bit too high, I'd say, just going up up the arm a bit too high. Make sure I'm set to local as well, just makes things a little bit easier on the move tool. I'm going to drag this down so it kind of affects up to the elbow, or as close to the elbow, and even down here it's probably going a little bit too far, so I'm going to bring it up a little bit just to soften up on the wrist itself. Now on the upper part of the character, what I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm just going to select the top part of the envelope. I'm going to drag it down so it only goes up to, let's say, like the shoulder. But that's very red, meaning it's going to be a very harsh kind of change there. So if I was to increase the outer radius, I know it gets pretty huge, but don't worry too much about it, and that's a lot more of a softer kind of change on the most part anyway. So let's see if we can just tweak this a little bit. Let's bring that back up. You do have to zoom in sometimes to make sure you're selecting the correct area. And then we're going to be making the inner radius, which is this one just here. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. And again, that's just going to affect it that little bit less. If I go all the way down, it should be a little bit softer. Now this side as well, a similar thing. Just make sure it stops sort of roughly at the elbow. And again, we can change this on the fly later anyway. So if I was to select the hand, let's just make sure the hand is actually okay. Now I'm not going to worry about the fingers just yet, but that would be a similar kind of thing. You want the hand bone, this sort of hand bone envelope to be affecting just the palm. You want the first, I mean that's not too bad there. You got the next one as well. That's not too bad, and you got the next one which is for the end. So that's actually quite good. The thumb probably looks okay as well. That should be okay. So yeah, not bad at all. So let's come out of that. I'll show you what happens. Basically, if I was to select, let's say all three, rotate. Whoops, that's the wrong way. And let's do that. You can kind of see what's happening there. It's just bending. I know it's not clean. It's kind of a bit weird, really. But this is where you probably want to select like individual parts as well. So like just that bone there. Let's bend that in quite a bit. And you can adjust the envelopes and stuff, but this is why maybe setting individual bones is quite a good idea. But this is just a quick kind of thing you can do from a distance. It's going to look okay, but again, you know, if you really want to go for super realism and have full control over the mesh, then yeah, you know, make sure that you allow yourself to have a single bone per finger. Well, not a single bone, but a set of bones per finger. Okay, so let's select the hand itself. Let's go and select that. Let's move it around and see what the shoulder and other parts look like. So, okay, first of all, the elbow. Let's focus on the wrist and the elbow, because we'll look at the shoulder a little bit later. So, I mean, the elbow's looking quite good. I'm happy with that. Not too bad. Let's just have a look at the wrist as well. Let's rotate the hand around. Yeah, it's looking quite good. It's twisting quite nicely. Not too much distortion. That looks good. Happy with that too. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to tweak the elbow a little bit. I'm not quite happy with the way it's looking, and I think that's to do with the fact that this is affecting it too much. So if I lift it a little bit, it might kick in. Maybe if I go, no, it needs to come back a little bit. Let's actually shrink this as well. Boom, that's going to be a little bit better hopefully. So if I just go back, so you see that's a little bit closer, a little bit cleaner. So if I was to move the actual hand, now what happens, it kind of goes in, and that's what you want. You kind of want that overlap. You don't want it to be this weird kind of bend at the elbow. Now let's have a look at the shoulder, the very last thing that I want to cover really, maybe the head. You can see it's affecting too much. So again, if you lifted the arm up in the air, or maybe sort of around about here, you want to lose the effect on this part of the mesh. It doesn't look right. So what we're going to do is we're going to be going on the mesh, edit envelopes, we're going to select this arm just here, and we're just going to reduce that. So maybe we need to drop this down a little bit, like so. So you see it's a little bit more of a natural change. It's not kind of affecting it as much. And let's see if we can lift, we can move the arm about now and see what it looks like. So it's really, I mean, it's not that great because it's a little bit too harsh. So let's see if we can fix that. Let's go into edit envelopes, select this one, and like it's really harsh right there. Now the reason for that, there's a number of reasons actually. Firstly, the envelopes, we've got the inner envelope and the outer, so let's just increase the outer envelope. So it just kind of affects it a little bit more. Then we can lift the whole thing up as well. We don't even need to have the position where it's currently sat. So let's just lift it up in the air, and that will lose its effect on the base. Okay, so let's get rid of that selection also. Let's drop the hand down. I'm going to actually put this back to view just so I can move the hand around with a little bit more freedom. But you see how that's a lot better now? That's a lot better. It's not as sort of harsh, you kind of get the nice kind of bending there. And when you have a texture and you start working in all the different types of animations, like, you know, the waist and the shoulder, the chest, it should start all coming together quite nicely. So that's quite good also. That's not bad. Make sure you don't move the model. Yeah. So what you can also do is, usually what I'm going to do, I'm going to try it out in just a second. I'm going to do the head, the very last thing. I know this tutorial is getting a little bit long, but this is quite a tedious process, should we call it, where I know a lot of people have difficulties doing it. So I just thought I'd, you know, do you a favor and show you as best as I can. Now, if you were to select the chest envelope, which sort of runs pretty much in the middle of his chest, you want to make sure it doesn't affect so high, because you want the head bone, you want this head envelope to affect the head, but because this one here is affecting so much, it's going to sort of take away from, you know, what the head can affect. So I'm going to drag that down so it just kind of goes up to the neck. That's what you want, just the kind of neck area. And then I can select the head, and you can see it's a little bit red, a little bit more red. You don't want it to be orange on the chin. That's a big no-no. So what you can do is you can select the base of the head envelope. You can drag it forward and maybe drag it down as well. Okay, so you're kind of getting the coverage. Oh, that's not good. That is not good. Let's reduce the outer radius down, because again, you don't want to have the head affecting like the tie and all the other bits on the character. I'm going to reduce that all the way down. So you see how small that is. Yet the inner radius is really not too dissimilar. I'm just going to bring that in a little bit more. I'm going to deselect this, and then I can select the bone for the head, and I can rotate, and that kind of works quite well. You know, there's a bit of distortion if I was to go too far. It's quite thin, so the reason for that is because the head bone isn't affecting the head as much as it should. So if you look at the back here, it's kind of fading away and it's not quite doing what it should. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger on the top. Don't worry if it looks a little bit odd, it's not important, because it's just how it affects your model. That's the key thing. So I'm going to make the inner radius bigger as well, so it kind of affects the neck a little bit more. Just soften that up a little bit, and yeah. Now, one thing we can do just to make our lives a little bit easier here is we can go into the side view here. Let's press F3 just so it brings up the actual color. you can go onto the selection tool and go onto the polygon kind of lasso, I guess, type of selection, the point by point selection, and I can click around the entire kind of head area, the areas that I want this bone to affect absolutely 100%. So I've got, okay, ignore that, well, it's not wrong, but you need to make sure that you highlight vertices first and then you do that. So I'm not going to go all the way down to the neck, I'm going to go just into or just above the neck area, because I want the neck to still have a bit of flexibility. We don't want that to lose that, although it's going to look really weird. But now you can see it selected the verts around the head. And once you've done that, okay, and it's important that you do this in an orthographic view. I've done it in my left view because it will select it exactly the same on the opposite side. Okay, and then we're going to go down and we're going to go on to hitting the spanner just here, which is the weight tool. What that means is we can set a specific weight, which is like red would be 1, because that means it will completely affect it, whereas like 0.1 would be like the blue, for instance. So if I go with number 1, you notice how that's all 10 red now. The chin is now red, the side of the face is now red, and what that means now is that it is going to completely affect that, and there's not going to be any distortion, at least there shouldn't be anyway. So you see how that works now. The head is perfectly fine. There's still that kind of flex in the neck. Bit of an issue with the top of the tie, but I can fix that just by adjusting the envelopes a little bit. If I wanted to, I could quite easily, and this is I guess one last thing I want to show you, is how to exclude vertices from being affected by one bone. So that could be done when you select, the thigh bone could affect, like the left thigh bone here could affect the right part of the mesh. So you can see how it's kind of affecting the inside, like the crotch area here. If you don't want this bone to affect all the way down there, you can just go on vertices. You can kind of click over the areas you don't want that leg to affect, like so. You go down and you simply click onto this button here, which says exclude selected vertices. Now when you hit this, it will distort. Don't worry too much about that. It looks hideous, I know, but as soon as you click on another envelope, it will snap back into its position. And as I now select that initial envelope, it now no longer affects the verts that I selected. Okay, so it's a really kind of nifty tool. And if I was to select the head, for instance, I don't want the head bone to affect like the whole tie area. So if I was to select this whole bunch right here, boom, and then I go down, exclude selected, yes, it will distort, but don't worry too much. Select any envelope and it will snap back. And if I go back now and try that again, I mean, it may not be perfect because I'm rushing over this, but you can see when I move the head, it no longer moves the tie. Okay, so that's perfect. It's actually really good. Really pleased with that. So hopefully that's given you some sort of insight into how to animate, or how to rig your character. I keep saying animate, but you're not quite there yet. There is a way that you can mirror one side onto the other. So let's give that a go. It doesn't always work very well though, so I'm always a bit skeptical, especially when it comes to showing people how to use it. But you can, if you are in like edit envelopes, you can go onto mirror mode. So turn mirror mode on. You normally get two sides. You get like a red side and you get a green side and a blue side. Now if you look really close, you can't really see it, but there's little dots on one side which are blue. On the other side, they're green. Now you can go on to paste green to blue or paste blue to green, vice versa. But mirror mode is so iffy, it doesn't really work too well, so I wouldn't even go into it. I would literally do it bone by bone. That way you know for sure that it's going to work. And it doesn't take too long. If you follow what I've shown you, just do it bit by bit and you will get it done fairly quickly. And once you've done that, you can start on the animation. And I will be having more tutorials up, guys, very, very soon on how to get an idle animation and how you can create your own like attack animations, for instance, or whatever they might be. Okay, so I don't think I've missed anything. Hopefully I haven't. I've covered how you, obviously if you have an older version, then just to scrap the actual rig and make a new one. How you can create a bone structure or a rig, which is the cat animation toolkit. Rig, a base human. We've positioned it so it fits in with the position of the character. We've added the skin. We've edited the envelopes as well, and I've showed you how to exclude selected vertices and actually be able to set weights of vertices as well, which is quite useful. I've covered quite a few different skills there. Hopefully you found them useful. Like I was saying, just the very last thing, if you were to finish but your character's a bit wonky, like one of the arms is like up here, one of the legs may not be exactly where it started off, like somewhere here. Like I said, if you select just like the base or any bone, but if you select the triangular base, before I do this, I'm just going to save, just in case. And you go to the motion tab, and you're going to scroll down. You're going to remove your animation layer. So you're going to hit the X. And once you get rid of that, your character will snap back to his original position. This does not affect the rigging. This does not affect the skinning. It's all going to be there still. But what happens is you've just got rid of the animation layer. You can add a new one, hit that stop icon to go into play, and now your character's ready to animate, and he's back in his standing pose. Okay, so hopefully you've enjoyed this tutorial. I know it's been long. Drop a like, guys, if you enjoyed or if you find this helpful, and yeah, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you next time.